What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the best poisonous concoction ranger build in Path of Exile 2. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of the setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both leveling and any game. And then finally we will go over the passive tree, attributes, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you are looking for this build on the website, then click my link in this video's description or the pinned comment. This is an amazing, low-budget endgame build that pretty much just runs insanely fast and throws out poisonous concoctions at your enemies, which spreads through hundreds of targets and destroys them in split seconds. The more monsters, the higher our poison buildup gets, so we don't have to worry about no rotations or the perfect damage uptime, as our automatic poison scaling does all of this by itself. On top of this, specifically for endgame, we are going to be using the Chaos Inoculation to become immune to chaos damage, and then scale the energy shield as our defense. So if you want to zoom through the content in few seconds and destroy everything standing in our way, then this is it. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Ranger and our ascendancy is the Pathfinder. Then for the first skill we have the Poisonous Concoction with the support gems such as the Scatter Shot, Chaos Infusion, Close Combat, Chaos Mastery, and the Deadly Poison. Then second, we get Divine Arrow with the Fawn of Rage, Fawn of Mana, and Martial Tempo. Then next we got the Despair with the Heightened Curse. Next we have Contagion with the Chaotic Freeze, Magnified Effect, Arcane Tempo, and Mobility. Next up we have the Ghost Dance with the Fast Forward and Herbalism. Next we got the Grim Feast with no support gem. Then next we have the Eye of Winter with the Withering Touch, Unleash, Persistence, and Inspiration. And finally for the last one we are using the Wind Dancer with the Blind and Maim. As you can see, most of this setup is structured around using the Poisonous Concoction to delete huge amount of enemies in few seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their duration and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next we also have a leveling build in case if you are starting your journey from level 0 and you want to use it up until about level 25, where you should start getting our most important skills. So first off we have the Lightning Arrow with the Martial Tempo and the Lightning Infusion. Then next we have Lightning Rod with a Scatter Shot and Magnified Effect. Next we have the Flame Wall with the Spell Cascade and the Fortress. Next we got Escape Shot with the Deep Freeze and Cold Infusion. And then finally we are using the Herald of the Thunder with no support gems. This is your basic setup up until you get our build's two most important skills. In the early stage of progression we are simply using the Lightning Rod into the Lightning Arrow, while on top of this adding the Flame Wall to allow our arrows to gain fire damage as they pass through the flames. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this projectile damage node, and then go like this while taking these 4. So Blur, Combat Alchemy, Honed Instincts, and the Clean Shot. Then next we keep on going until this point, and then also grab all of these. So Master Fletching, Stacking Toxins, Lasting Toxins, Escape Velocity, and the Freedom of Movement. Then from here we want to circle back a little and take this one node called the Crippling Toxins. Then afterwards we now go like this and then take the right, and from here just keep on going while also taking the Leeching Toxins and the Kite Runner. And then from this point you can unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. Also, as far as attributes go, you just simply want to fulfill your attribute requirements for gear and skill gems, and then after that spend the rest of your leftover attributes into more dexterity. And the top 4 best options to go for is the increased bonus gain from Equipped Quiver. Then second we want the increased maximum energy shield. Then third we get increased magnitude of poison you inflict. And then finally we have increased poison duration. All of these are very important, but equip whichever one you get first. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to get Brew Concoction, as this gives you the option to pick the Poisonous Concoction that provides us with our main skill and the core of our build. Then second we get the Contagious Contamination, which mostly saves us from having to run the Herald of the Plague, which costs about 30 spirit. Then third we get the Overwhelming Toxicity, which doubles our poison damage, assuming that we can keep up with our poison stacks. And then finally for the last one we got the Traveler's Wisdom, which gives us 6 extra passive nodes. This might not sound like much, but at the endgame we can see a huge impact, especially if we spend them on more energy shields. So feel free to use the exact same path as I have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find a link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the tree. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and this build will benefit a lot from a high pack size, so that our poison can spread through and use the contagious contamination. Endgame activities with bunch of monsters like the Breach is great for our build, so then when we start we wanna first of all go to the left side and get all of these nodes. Then now go to the right and get all of these nodes as well. And then from this point and onwards, you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this, we have even more passives, which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter. So this is again up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Now in the next part we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Widow Whale with as much quiver effect as possible, so at least 220% is highly recommended, as this makes you hit 300% breakpoint with alpha nodes on the passive skill tree. However, if you are going full solo and you don't have a Widow Whale, then you won't use any bow that has a plus levels of all projectile skills, or pretty much anything else that would increase our DPS. On top of this, we also are using an offhand called the Fire Quiver. And the most powerful thing on this one is increased damage with the bow skills. However, I've heard that developers might nerf it soon, so if that happens, then look for stats to plus levels of all projectile skills and more dexterity. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara, and here pretty much we wanna get as much energy shield as possible. Also, max life and intelligence are useful too. Then for the chest we have the Ghost Wrath. This will convert part of your life to the energy shield. This will apply before the Chaos Inoculation node, and will give us pretty much as much energy shield as other body armor. However, if you can't afford this, then for the budget versions, try to look for anything similar, with a high evasion and energy shield. Then for the belt we have the Fine Belt with a faster flask recovery, max life, max mana, more charm slots and lightning resistance. However, if you don't use the Ghost Wrath, then the max life is a useless stat, so in that case go with more evasion. Then for gloves we got the Advanced Spiral Warps, and here also we want to go with as much evasion and energy shield as possible. On top of this is a good place to get free resistance like Chaos and Fire. Then for boots we're using Advanced Silk Slippers, and here the biggest priority is as much movement speed as possible, while also getting all the resistances and evasion or max energy shield. Then for the first ring we got the Prismatic Ring, with percentage to all elemental resistances. And for bonus stats we want accuracy, max life, strength and lightning resistance. While for the second one we have the Sapphire Ring with a cold resistance. And for more we got evasion, max life and fire resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the Solar Amulet, which gives us more spirit. This is the hardest piece of the gear to get perfected, and after you finish maximizing your quiver, this should be the next place where to invest most of your time into. And for stats we want max energy shield, max life, levels of all projectile skills, more strength and intelligence. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. The next we have runes. During early item progression, most gear is sacred with resistant runes. However, once your elemental resistances have been capped and resistant runes are no longer necessary, then you want to opt in to increase your maximum life, with body runes or consider Sakting a soul core. So right now on our weapon and offhand, we're using the Iron rune, while for the rest of our equipment we're going with the Glacial rune. And as far as getting this gear goes, by far the best way to get better gear in the campaign is to check the vendor in the town each time you level up, as vendors can change their offerings based on your level, so this is the best way to find upgrades. And then after level 65, you just wanna keep continuing repeating your maps until tier 16. And again, for more in-depth tutorial, check out my gearing guide video. Then on top of this, we need to quickly look into the charms. Charms are incredibly useful, as by having the right one equipped at the right time can save you from dying. If you are struggling with certain bosses, then look into what damage type they are using, and then use that specific charm to increase your resistance. For me personally, I like to use the Taving charm for when we become frozen. Then second, get the Stone charm for stuns. And then finally for the last one, get the Golden charm for when we kill rares and uniques. But as I said, which one you choose will entirely depend on the enemies that you're fighting. So feel free to experiment and mix and match. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. So while running around in a map, you should not be using anything more than just the poisonous concoction. Rare monsters will die very fast because of the poison that gets spread through them from the contamination passive. However, in a situation where the pack size is high, like in the breaches, you then want to use the contagion skill to spread poison in an even bigger area than contagious contamination does by itself. And then second for bossing. This time we want to start with a couple of fine arrows before the boss becomes targetable. Then activate the spare. Then afterwards use contagion to enable the freezing boss, and finally use Eye of Winter for massive DPS. And after all of this, you can simply spam poisonous concoction and just keep up your debuffs as they expire. So let me know what you think about this build in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, then you definitely don't want to miss my top 3 best ranger builds video, where I showed even more powerful builds. So click the screen now and I'll see you in the next one.